Welcome, and in this chapter, we're going to focus on chapter 14, section 3, the economy and society of the early Islamic world. So if you're taking notes on your spice chart, we're going to hit the letters I, S, and E in this lecture. So by the end of the period, by the end of this lecture, I want you to be able to explain the characteristics of Islamic societies and their economic developments, and I want you to support that with evidence and reasoning on the spice chart. So again, you're going to focus on the characteristics of the Islamic society and the economic developments. So the first thing we're going to look at is the economy and the society of the early Islamic world. That is the title of this section. And the economy is going to be heavily based and supported by the agricultural production that takes place. And this falls under the theme of interaction between humans and the environment, because farming is a way that humans interact with the environment. We take a plant that normally isn't growing somewhere and we plant it, and then we now change the landscape. The expansion of large empires like the Umayyad and the Abbasid, what they did was they linked lands from India all the way to North Africa. And what's significant about that is that it's all kind of on the same horizontal plane. It's all within the same latitude belt. So if you know about geography, you know that latitude determines climate. So if you have a large empire spanning the same latitude, you're going to have very similar climates. So when Arab merchants or traders found a crop in one part of the empire and they traveled west or east to a different part of their empire and they found that the plant grew there, what you start to see is the spread of crops. And so during the Abbasid and the Umayyad caliphates, we see this mass transferring of crops from India to North Africa and everywhere in between. Things like lemon, limes, artichokes, cotton, indigo, and more and more. And what this does is these new crops are going to have a profound effect. Not only are they going to change the landscape, but they're going to allow crops to grow in places where there had not been any crops before. Crops that can grow in dry climate are going to thrive in the Arabian Peninsula and Persia. And so now you're going to be able to grow food throughout the year. And one thing that you're going to see throughout this course is that whenever a society produces an abundance of food and whenever their agricultural output increases, their population and their trade increases, because a large agricultural surplus allows you to feed a large amount of workers. So that means less people have to devote their life to farming, and they could devote their lives to making products and goods to be traded. So one of the things that helped spread these crops is agricultural experimentation. Like I said, merchants would move from one place to another and see what plants would grow, and then they would document, they would write this down, and they would keep track of these records so that they were able to, leave written record of what worked, what didn't work, and pass that knowledge on. And so through manuscripts, they were able to document a lot of this and help spread these crops throughout what is known as Dar al-Islam. So that's going to then contribute to the urban growth. And we're going to see this throughout the Islamic world, throughout Dar al-Islam. So here in Central Asia, right, cities like Merv and Bukhara and Samarkand, pictured here, are going to become bigger commercial centers. These were already important centers because going back to the ancient times when the Romans traded with the Han Chinese, these were stops along the Silk Road. So these were trading centers back then, but now we're going to see them grow even larger. Cities in Persia, cities like Isfahan and Nishapur, Basra, these are going to grow again because of the growth in agriculture. They're going to become large industrial centers where you're going to make goods that are being traded. In Southwest Asia, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem are going to become big metropolis areas. In North Africa, we're going to see urban growth in places like Alexandria, Egypt, and in places like Tangier and Tunis. In Spain, so Muslim conquerors also conquer Spain, and you're going to see thriving industrial centers and commercial centers in Cordoba and Toledo and throughout the southern part of Spain. So some of the most beautiful buildings today in Spain were buildings that were built during the Muslim period in Spanish history. Remember in chapter 15 when I talked about the transferring of technology at the Battle of the Talas River, the Arabs who defeated the Chinese at that battle captured artisans who knew how to make paper and took them back to their empire with them. So they introduced paper making. And pretty soon you saw paper production throughout Dar al-Islam as well. And so now this paper production increases, allows for more writing, more recording of history, more recording of things that you're studying. And so you're also going to see a thriving of culture that we'll get to later. So all this growth is going to allow Muslims to take advantage of the trade routes that had already been established. The overland trade routes, the sea trade routes that had already been established are going to grow even more now. So during this period, we're going to see a thriving and a growth along the Silk Roads and around the Indian Ocean. Okay, so on the overland routes, the Silk Roads that were already in place, we're going to see more growth. You're going to see the more growth in caravan travel using camels, which are able to travel long distances. Their eyelids are well suited to travel through the desert. They don't. They could go long periods without a lot of food. And along the way, throughout the Silk Road, we're going to see the formation of caravanserai, these inns, where it's like a motel, you can kind of say, right? You pull in, you rest there, and then you buy and you eat, and you set up shop in the middle courtyard. You set up shop, and traveling merchants exchange goods and exchange ideas and exchange technologies. In addition to the Silk Roads, Persian and Arab merchants are also going to be very, very active on the Indian Ocean. So we're also going to see a very, very big increase in trade in the Indian Ocean. And the Arab and Persian sailors of Dar al-Islam are going to play a very important role in transferring technologies throughout the region. So they are not so much the inventors of technology, but they are the transmitters. They take things like the compass from China, the lateen sail in the Indian Ocean, the astrolabe of the ancient Greek mariners, and they improve on them. They study them, they improve on them, they diffuse them. And so pretty soon we see better ship designs, better map taking, and all of this is going to contribute to more commerce. And Muslim merchants are going to link the Indian Ocean. They are going to link East Africa. And we'll study that in a different chapter. But in East Africa, a language will emerge that blends Arabic with the African Bantu languages to form Swahili, a language that was created to be able to trade for merchants. We're going to see Islamic merchants have a big impact on India and in Southeast Asia. In fact, today, the country in the world with the most Muslims in it is Indonesia. It has the largest Muslim population, and that's in Southeast Asia, far away from the Arabian Peninsula. But it takes its root during this period of these merchants that are traveling throughout the Indian Ocean basin for commerce. They also create or expand previous practices in banking. So banking wasn't new, but under the Islamic empires, banks grow a lot larger and they take on more functions. They loan money, they transfer foreign currencies. They begin to have these notes called saks, which is where we get our word check from, right? They begin to have these letters of credit that say, here, this person has money in my bank and this paper is legit. You can use this as a transaction to show that, or to loan this person money because you can get it from me at my bank. So that practice of banking is going to increase economic activity as well. So that's going to become important. And you're going to see better organization of trade, right? Businessmen are not going to want to go out on these ventures by themselves. They're going to begin to organize early forms of companies, right? They're going to have business organization to invest together, renting cargo space, coordinating their travels. So all of these types of business enterprises are going to have more availability of money, for trade, that means more availability of goods, more interaction, and all of this then means more production. People that are making these goods are going to have more jobs. So we're going to see this organization of trade be beneficial to the Islamic world and to the merchants from around the Afro-Eurasia they are in touch with. In this picture that's here, in the smaller picture, this is also in your book. It's a 13th century manuscript showing merchants at a slave market in southern Arabia dealing slaves that were captured in sub-Saharan Africa. So slaves traded in Islamic markets went as far as Russia, Eastern Europe, and this is actually the beginning of the African slave trade. It's nowhere as voluminous as it's going to be, but it begins with Arab merchants trading slaves to sub-Saharan Africa into the Mediterranean to work on plantations in the Mediterranean and to be sold in other markets. You could see the extent of trade having a big impact on Spain. So Spain was known as the Caliphate of Cordoba. So the Muslim rulers of Spain, did not recognize the Abbasids as their authority. So in their region known as Al-Andalus, the Caliphate of Cordoba, they fashioned their own Islamic kingdom, but they were very much engaged in this world of trade, and merchants from there traveled all the way to India, to the Indian Ocean, and the wealth was brought back to Spain. And here at the city of Cordoba, the Great Mosque of Cordoba was built, and this was one of the most magnificent centers of learning. So they brought, with all this money, they're bringing in free schools to teach Islamic learning and scholarship. They have a library with 400,000 volumes in it. Okay, this huge mosque that is built, beautiful architecture, one of the, considered one of the most beautiful buildings in the world today, was fashioned by the amount of wealth that was being brought in. And so you can see the prayer niche here that is part of the Great Mosque of Cordoba that you could still visit today. And in Sevilla, the city of Sevilla, the Alcazar was also an Islamic building. And Islamic, you could see the architecture. The city of Toledo, all of these cities were great commercial centers that grew because of Islamic merchants and as centers of learning. So in fact, some of the earliest centers of learning in Europe were the Islamic centers in Spain. And Europeans who wanted to read and learn during the Middle Ages would go to Spain to take advantage of their collections and their manuscripts. One of the things we're going to see socially now is we're going to look at the impact that the Islamic expansion has on the status of women. When Islam first began, women were considered equal. Muhammad had married his boss, essentially, right? His wife was a merchant. And in the Quran, they give women, security that they had not had before in Arabian society. So women and anyone who prayed to Allah and accepted Allah and became a Muslim was considered equal. So early on, right, there was some equal status for women. But later, as Islam begins to spread and it begins to incorporate the people with different patriarchal cultures, you also begin to see things like the Sharia law writing and putting a little bit more restrictions on women. So the Sharia permitted men to, take Muhammad's example and take up to 4 wives as long as they could financially maintain them. And then as it expands into Persia and into the Byzantine Empire, and they encounter these other patriarchal societies, they adopt these customs such as veiling. So when you hear of women covering their face in the Islamic world, the practice of veiling was actually gotten from the Persians and from the Byzantines that had had this practice before, and it was a sign of modesty, of upper class urban women covering their faces in a show of modesty and only letting their families and their husbands see them as they are. So think, be able to compare this to upper class women in China. Remember, upper class women in China had their feet bound. So you have other examples of patriarchal practices being put on women. One of the things we're going to learn in this course is we're going to learn how to analyze documents. And a lot of the questions, when we start taking like AP style exams, you're going to see excerpts, little excerpts of primary source documents or secondary source documents, and then you're going to have to be able to answer questions. So here's another practice for you, right? You could just pause the slide and you could read this excerpt to see how the AP exam will test your knowledge on some of this material. So you'll be able to use what you read about women in the textbook and then be able to analyze this document and answer questions on it. You're not going to do anything with it now. I'm just giving you this as an example of the type of skill that's to come. So by now, you should be able to explain to others what the economic practices were that allowed the Islamic empires to thrive. And you should be able to explain how the role of women in Islamic society changes over time. Okay, so be able to use evidence, such as veiling or talking about things like Sharia or the Quran and what you read in the textbook and why these practices changed over time. So that's it for section 3. So again, if you have any questions, you can email me or ask them in class or go back and view the slideshow. I hope this is helpful and I hope it's helping you better understand the chapter. Okay, that's it for this lesson.